used to work security at a mall. Not the kind with armed guards or big crime problems, just your average mid-sized suburban mall with food courts, escalators, and way too much fluorescent lighting. It was in a city just outside Houston. I won't name it here. I still live nearby. This happened in 2019, right before the holiday season. I was 26, working night shifts 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., part of a small overnight crew who kept an eye on things after hours. 2 people per night, 1 walking patrols, 1 monitoring the cameras. Wasn't a bad job. Boring mostly. I liked the quiet. After midnight, the only people in the building were us and a cleaning contractor who came by for the food court and restrooms. The mall had 3 levels, 2 above ground, 1 basement level that connected to service corridors, electrical rooms, and delivery docks. That's where I usually started my shift, checking locked doors and walking through the long, cold concrete tunnels with my radio crackling every so often. One night I was paired with a guy named Sam. He was new but sharp. I took the walking shift and let him sit with the monitors upstairs. Around 2:15 a.m., I was in the basement corridor that ran behind the closed anchor stores. It was quiet like always. My footsteps echoed. I passed the locked entrance to an old department store that had gone out of business 2 years earlier. The hallway lights flickered once. Then just ahead of me, I heard a door click. Soft metallic, like a latch lifting. I stopped. The hallway was empty. Then I heard a sound I still remember clearly, someone breathing. Not loud, just steady. Right around the next corner, I radioed Sam. Anyone on camera near corridor 3B? He said no. No motion, no one near me. I told him to switch to camera 19 and watch the back hallway. Then I turned the corner. No one there, but one of the service doors was slightly open, just a crack. It should have been locked. I approached slowly, listening. The breathing had stopped. I nudged the door open. It led into a short maintenance hallway with 2 storage rooms on either side. I shined my flashlight in. Empty, but something was off. The air was colder in here, and on the floor was a single shoe, a black sneaker worn and dirty lying sideways. No footprints, no other signs of anyone. I backed out, radioed Sam again, and asked if he saw anything on the cameras. He said no, but added something strange. Cam 19 glitched for like 10 seconds. Just went black. Right when I turned the corner, I logged the open door in my report and moved on. The rest of the night passed without incident. The next night, Sam didn't show up. The supervisor said he'd called in sick. I worked with Angela instead. She was older, used to be a cop. Knew the building better than anyone. Around 3 a.m., she radioed me. "Did you open corridor 3B? No, I said. I haven't gone near it tonight. Someone just walked past camera 19. Looked like a guy in a hoodie. I froze. She replayed the footage. It was grainy, but yeah, someone walked down that hallway. But here's the weird part. He didn't trip the motion lights. They stayed off the entire time. Just this dark shape moving slowly through the dark corridor. Angela and I met at the junction and checked the hallway together. Nothing. No signs of forced entry. All doors locked. Even the sneaker was gone. We didn't talk much after that. Just nodded and went back to our shifts. 2 weeks later, Angela requested a transfer. She didn't say why. After that, I started getting the same hallway on every schedule. Corridor 3B, like it had become my post. One night, maybe a month later, I was walking past the old department store again. This time, the motion lights in the hallway turned on before I got there. That shouldn't happen. They were directionals set to trigger when someone walked into a zone. Turned the corner and saw nothing. Then my radio buzzed with static, loud, sharp. No voice, just that jagged electronic hiss. And then it went silent. Then from down the hall I heard a whisper. Not a word, just a sound, like breath being dragged across the concrete. I took one step back, and the lights went out. Every light in the hallway blinked off at once. It only lasted 2 seconds. When they came back on the service door, the same one from before was wide open. I didn't go in this time. I left, logged it, said the lock was loose. I didn't want to know. The next day, I asked one of the daytime tech guys about the camera in that hallway. He said something weird. That system's older. That camera always resets around 2:17 a.m. No idea why. Been doing that since before I started. I asked how long that was. He said 6 years. And before that, it had been replaced twice each time because it mysteriously burned out. I still don't know what's down that hallway. Maybe nothing. But every now and then, I still dream about walking through those corridors alone, turning that corner and seeing someone standing just out of reach of the light. Not moving, just watching and breathing. I used to work part-time at a shoe store in a mid-sized shopping mall in Illinois. It wasn't glamorous, minimum wage, long hours on my feet, awkward customers, but it was stable. I was 24 working while studying, and the mall was only 10 minutes from my apartment. The store was located on the second level, tucked between a closed-down video rental shop and one of those low-traffic luggage boutiques that somehow never changed inventory. Our team was small, just 4 of us. My shifts were usually evenings and weekends, but I'd occasionally get stuck with the closing shift. This story takes place in late November 2016. Holiday shopping hadn't kicked in fully yet, so the mall was still fairly quiet. That night I was scheduled to close alone, something I'd done plenty of times before. The shift itself was uneventful. Slow foot traffic, a few returns, some bored teens asking to try on sneakers they clearly weren't going to buy. I started closing up around 8:45. The mall officially closed at 9, but our last customer had left by 8:30. By 9:15, the lights were dimmed, register counted, floor mopped. I locked the gate and started walking through the back hall that employees use to access the freight elevator and exit into the service lot. There's a long corridor behind the storefronts most people never see. Gray concrete walls, utility doors, and the buzz of overhead fluorescents. It's quiet. Too quiet sometimes, especially at night. That's when I first noticed something was off. Halfway down the hallway, I saw that one of the motion sensor lights had already turned on ahead of me. That wasn't unusual by itself. Sometimes they triggered early. But this one turned off again as I approached. That wasn't normal. Motion lights shouldn't deactivate while you're moving toward them. I slowed down. My footsteps echoed. I was alone, or at least I thought I was. As I reached the end of the hallway near the freight elevator, I heard it, just a whisper of sound. Shh, like something being dragged slowly across the floor. I stopped, turned around. Nothing. The hallway was empty behind me, the air still. I turned back toward the elevator. The call button was already lit, but I hadn't pressed it yet. I stood there for a few seconds waiting. The elevator didn't come. Then the light on the button went off. I reached out and pressed it myself. It flicked back on. I waited. When the doors finally opened, I stepped inside and pressed B for basement, where the employee parking lot exit was. The elevator didn't move. It just sat there, doors open, interior lights buzzing softly. I pressed the button again. Nothing. Then from just outside the elevator, around the corner in the hallway, I heard a whisper. Clear this time. My name. It wasn't loud. Not a shout. Just someone saying my name in a conversational tone like they were asking a question. I stepped back out of the elevator, heart racing. Hello. No answer. I looked around the corner. Still empty. That's when the elevator doors closed behind me. I spun around and hit the call button again. The doors opened instantly, but the inside was dark. The lights were off. That shouldn't be possible. I didn't get in. Instead, I turned and walked fast back down the corridor toward the main mall floor, planning to exit through the front entrance and loop around to my car. That's when I saw the man. He was standing in the middle of the hallway, facing away from me. Not moving. He wasn't wearing a uniform, just a dark hoodie and jeans. I stopped. Sir, I said, trying to sound official. The mall is closed. He didn't respond, didn't turn. He just stood there. I took one cautious step backward, and his head turned, not his body, just his head. Just enough for me to see the outline of his jaw. Then he took a step toward me. That was enough. I turned and ran back into the store, fumbled with the keys and ducked under the gate before I had it fully unlocked. I didn't stop to turn on the lights. I crouched behind the counter, holding my breath phone in my hand. I texted my manager. Hey, I think someone's still in the mall. Guy followed me near the elevator. Not a customer. Mall's closed. No response. For 10 minutes, I sat there staring through the dark. Then I heard something. Not outside. Inside the store. A soft click. Like someone trying the back stockroom door. The one that led into the corridor I had just fled. It was locked, but someone was testing it. Slowly, carefully. I stayed there until I heard the mall security radio through the hallway speakers, announcing a sweep. It was their routine hourly check-in. The noise stopped. Eventually, I slipped out, ran to the front entrance, and exited through the food court, luckily still open for staff cleanup. I didn't look back. I filed an incident report the next day. Mall security reviewed the cameras. They saw me. They saw me press the elevator. They saw me turn and look into the hallway. But according to them, there was no one else there. No man. No shadows. No elevator malfunction. They said maybe I was tired, stressed. They said people imagine things when it's late. But I know what I saw. I worked 3 more shifts after that before I quit. I still visit that mall sometimes during the day. But I never take the employee hallway, and I never ever ride that elevator again. I worked the closing shift at a clothing store inside a shopping mall for about a year. It wasn't a big brand, just one of those mid-range chains with neatly folded jeans canned playlists, and sales associates paid just enough to pretend we cared. The store was at the far end of the 2nd floor, near a rarely used escalator, and across from a cosmetics shop that closed an hour earlier than we did. That meant that by 9:00 p.m., our little wing of the mall got very quiet. I didn't mind working nights. I liked folding in peace and avoiding the chaos of the day shift. But I also started noticing things. Small things. The mall after closing feels different. Not just quiet, empty in a way that feels unnatural. It's like the building exhales after the last customer leaves, and what's left behind doesn't belong to anyone. I first noticed something strange in late October 2022. I was folding denim near the back of the store, facing the fitting rooms. The lights in the hall flickered, but that wasn't unusual. Old wiring, we were told. But then one of the fitting room doors closed. Slowly, just a quiet click. I froze. We hadn't had any customers in for over 45 minutes, and I'd cleaned all the stalls earlier. I would have seen or heard someone go in. I walked over, knocked gently. "Hello, store's closing." No answer. I opened the door. Empty. I chalked it up to air pressure, or the HVAC system. But when I turned to walk away, I noticed something on the mirror inside. A single fingerprint, pressed right in the center. It wasn't there earlier. I wiped it down and moved on. The next week it happened again. This time I was in the stockroom. I heard movement out front and assumed one of the mall cleaners had come in to collect trash. But when I stepped out, the gate was still locked. The store was empty. A display table near the front had shifted slightly, just enough that the mannequins were no longer centered. I stood there for a moment, trying to convince myself it was my imagination. Then the fire alarm light above the entrance flashed just once. No sound, just a quick pulse of red. It wasn't wired to the store system. It was part of the mall's, and it never did that before. A few nights later, I had to stay late and close alone. My coworker called out sick, and corporate was too cheap to call in a replacement for a quiet weekday. Around 9:45 p.m., I was behind the register running the end-of-day totals when I saw something on the security monitor. Each store had a small black and white camera feed near the register. Ours covered only the inside of the store, not the entrance. In the monitor near the back fitting room hallway, I saw someone step out of view. Just a shoulder and the side of a head, gone in a flash. I turned and ran back there. Nothing. No sound, no footsteps, no doors. But on the floor was a shoe. Just one. A black ballet flat, slightly scuffed, left sitting in the middle of the hallway. I picked it up and checked the stalls. All empty. I tossed the shoe in the lost and found, and finished closing watching the monitor obsessively the rest of the night. I told my manager the next day. She shrugged. People forget stuff. Maybe someone was hiding in the stall, but she didn't check the camera footage. No one ever did. That was when I started checking the time more closely. Almost every weird thing that happened, lights flickering, alarm, flashes, noises, they all happened around the same time. 9:17 p.m. It was always 9:17. Once I noticed it, I couldn't unsee it. I even tested it. One night I stood perfectly still near the register at 9:16 and watched the security monitor. Right on time, a figure passed across the screen. Fast, low to the ground, not walking, crawling. But when I turned to look, there was nothing there. I stayed late that night, not because I wanted to, but because I was afraid to walk through the mall alone. When I finally left the corridor, lights near our exit were already off. I walked quickly past shuttered stores, the echo of my footsteps, louder than they should have been. Just before I reached the stairwell, I heard something behind me. Not a voice, not a footstep. Breathing. Close. I turned and saw a shape standing across the corridor, just outside the light. No details, just height, posture, stillness. I didn't move. I didn't blink. And it didn't either. Until the light above it buzzed and flickered, and it was gone. I took the stairs 2 at a time and didn't look back. The next day, I told mall security. They said no one was caught on the main hallway cameras. Not even me. I should have quit then. But I didn't. I stayed 3 more weeks. The last night I worked there, I decided to leave a note on the mirror in the back fitting room. I wrote, "What do you want?" with a dry erase marker and left it overnight. I came in the next morning to pick up my last paycheck. The note was gone, but underneath scrawled in something darker. Maybe Sharpie was one word. Company. I don't talk about it much. People laugh when I tell them. But every time I visit that mall, now I feel it. The cold corner in the hallway, the empty reflection in store windows, and 9:17 on the dot when I always make sure I'm not around. I worked in a mall for almost 2 years while trying to save for school. It was one of those mid-sized centers outside a major city filled with mid-tier clothing stores, off-brand electronics shops, and a food court that always smelled faintly of burnt grease. The job itself was fine. I was a stock runner for a mid-range fashion store, nothing fancy. Mostly I stayed in the back folding sweaters and hauling boxes from the loading bay to the stock room. But sometimes they'd stick me on the closing shift, and that's when I started noticing things. The store backed up against a long gray employee hallway. It ran behind several stores and connected to service elevators, freight docks, and what we called the mechanical corridor, which maintenance used, but most retail staff avoided. You could go your entire shift without seeing another person back there after 9 p.m. This story happened in December 2018. I was closing with one other guy, Reggie. We got along fine, mostly kept to ourselves, worked fast so we could leave by 10:0. It was a Thursday. Cold, slow. Maybe 4 customers after 8:0 p.m. Around 9:15, Reggie went to the back to break down boxes. I stayed out front, folding display shirts and cleaning up fitting rooms. At 9:45, I checked the back to see if he needed help before we started shutting down. He wasn't there. Not in the stock room, not in the hallway outside. I called his name. No answer. I figured he had gone to the loading dock, or maybe run something up to mall security. I gave it a few minutes. Then I saw his name tag. It was on the floor just outside the utility door that led into the mechanical corridor. The badge was still clipped to a folded lanyard. Clean. Almost too clean. I knocked on the utility door. No response. Tried the handle. Unlocked. Now this corridor wasn't for retail employees. It was narrow, smelled like dust and old pipes, and ran the full length of the mall behind the stores. We were told not to go in there without a facilities pass, but something felt wrong. Reggie wasn't the type to wander. I stepped inside. The air changed instantly cooler, like the ventilation didn't quite reach there. The lighting was different, too. Bare bulbs in wire cages, spaced too far apart, casting long black stretches between pools of yellow. I called again. Reggie. No response. The corridor split into two, one path, curving back toward the loading docks. The other into what looked like a sub-panel room, with junction boxes and dusty electrical switches. I followed the curve toward the dock. That's when I heard it. A click. Not metal, not a machine. A tongue click. Like someone standing very close and clucking once against the roof of their mouth. I stopped. It came again. Click. Then a shuffling sound. I backed up slowly toward the junction room, heart pounding. I didn't want to turn and run, not yet. My brain hadn't caught up to my body. I ducked into the electrical room and stood in silence. The air was so still I could hear the buzz of the overhead lights. Then I heard footsteps. Light, deliberate, not walking toward me, around me, like someone circling just outside the door. I pulled out my phone. No service. I typed a message to Reggie anyway. Where are you? I'm in the corridor. Found your badge. It didn't send. The footsteps stopped, then a whisper. Low, right outside the room. I couldn't make out the words, just the rhythm, like someone pretending to speak, just to make the sound. I waited. Eventually, I stepped back out. The hallway was empty. I took the shortest path back toward the main store. As I passed a fire extinguisher cabinet, I noticed something drawn in the dust on the glass. A smiley face, crude, childlike, with 3 eyes. I reached the door to the stockroom and slipped back inside. Reggie was there. He looked up like nothing had happened. "Where the hell were you?" I asked. He blinked. "Here, I've been here. You left your badge outside." He looked confused. "No, I didn't." I held it up. "That's not mine. Same name, same clip, same faded barcode." He swore he hadn't left the room. We closed quickly and left. I told him everything on the way to the parking lot. He laughed at first, but I could tell it rattled him. He said he'd seen weird things too. Shadows in the corridor lights that flickered when no one moved. I quit that job 2 weeks later, but one last thing happened before I left. On my final shift, I went to the back to grab inventory. There was a note taped to the inside of the stockroom door. No envelope, just a piece of yellow receipt paper. It said, "Don't come back here after dark," in handwriting that looked like it had been traced over multiple times. Underneath it scrawled smaller, "It doesn't forget your name." No one on staff admitted to writing it. I never found out who or what was back there. But every time I'm in a mall now, I glance at the service doors and wonder if it remembers me.